Yesterday, I went through the patch 11.08 notes in full. If you haven't checked out that video, then go and check it out and understand the patch notes for yourself, because today I'm going to talk about the general direction that that patch is taking us in and why I personally am not a fan of it. And in the first part of the video, I'm going to tell you why I'm not a fan of it. And in the second part of the video, I'm going to explain why I think even if you are a fan of that direction of going less util and more gunplay, even if you think that's a good idea, the execution of that idea from Riot, I personally don't think is that great, and I'll explain that as well. But first, why do I think this is a bad direction for the game to go? Well, let's understand Valorant as having two kind of main spheres. There's the rank sphere, and there's the pro play sphere. And generally when Riot does patches, there's normally some things in there that kind of affect both. The thing is though, I think that in this patch 11.08, both sides maybe got a bit worse overall, and I'll explain why. Let's start with the ranked side. Okay, so for ranked, I think the main problem that you're going to get from this patch is, in my opinion, that some of the behaviors that people really don't like in ranked, like insta-locking duelists who don't communicate, who just swing and take every fight they can, and based on whether they win or lose, you might often feel like you had no chance in the game, because if they win every fight, well then you're gonna win, and if they lose every fight, you're probably gonna lose. And sometimes you felt like you just had no impact in the game whatsoever, because this guy who, you know, wasn't listening, wasn't talking, and just taking every single fight on his own, you know, they just dictated how the game went for you, essentially. And I do think that those are behaviors that in an ideal world we would try to curtail, right? We would try and reduce those behaviors in ranked. However, this patch, I think, does the opposite of that, right? This patch kind of says, no, go ahead. Take all the fights, because your initiator player doesn't actually have the util to help set you up and play more with the team and hope that you will listen. So yeah, go ahead, Reyna. Swing through that smoke and see if you can win that duel, which you definitely won't, and die. And I lost the game because of you, right? I do feel like that might happen more, which is going to lead to maybe a bit more frustration. And the other thing that I think will get worse in ranked is that if you think about this patch overall, the agents who perhaps are quite good in ranked, you know, your Reynas, your Cloves, maybe even your agents like Phoenix, right? Your Jets, they didn't get nerfed, but pretty much everyone else did. I know Reyna got a tiny nerf, but, you know, everyone else or a lot of other agents got significantly nerfed. So really those ranked agents that were already good in ranked kind of got better versus everyone else, which again is just kind of incentivizing you to pick those agents. Don't bother picking your Geckos or your Breaches or whatever if you want to play for the team. There's just no point. You might as well just lock in those other agents, which again probably will be a bit stale if every single game you have has Clove, every single game you have has Reyna, there's a Jet there, there's maybe a Phoenix there. You are maybe having to play triple duelist, and people saying, oh well, triple duelist is the meta now. You know, like, that probably isn't going to be the most fun you could have. So those are my arguments for why ranked will maybe get a little bit worse overall. And now let's talk about pro play and why I think that might get a little bit worse overall as well. So in pro play, there's a couple things I want to talk about. The first one is that for me, and again, this is subjective, personal to me, you might not agree with this, but one thing that I like seeing in pro play is big util combos, right? When teams use util in interesting, unique ways that, you know, have come up with a plan on the fly or a set plan that works and it gets a kill, and it's like, oh, that's cool, right? That's cool, because you don't really get to see that anywhere else, right? There, even in ranked Radiant lobbies, you're just not going to see like 3-4 people's utility all combo together perfectly to get a kill. It just isn't going to happen, right? So pro play is really the only place you can go to see those sort of things. And whilst you will still see it, it will still happen in pro play, of course, you are, by doing this, by making utility kind of worse across the board and, you know, reducing the amount or, you know, time it takes to get back your utility, you are limiting the opportunities of doing that as well, right? So you are going to see that less often, which for me is a big shame, because it's one of the things I enjoy most about watching Valorant. The other concern that I have for pro play, though, is the round that you're seeing here from Fnatic, which is, I do think that this change maybe will push the timings of the game more to the extremes, right? Like, hey, it takes 60 seconds to get refreshable utility, so let's either just run a fast exec straight away, right, and just util dump everything, or let's play it even slower and take our time even more, right? And if we get the first one of, you know, everything being super fast, that's not necessarily a problem. Because I don't think it would happen all the time. That would only become a problem if it was literally like every single round in like every game, which I don't think it would be, right? I do think what is potentially going to be an issue, though, is if more teams play like Fnatic. If everyone played Valorant like Fnatic did at their pace, the esport would be a lot worse. Now, of course, that's not going to happen. Paper Recs aren't going to do that. There's probably a lot of Pacific teams and China teams that will not play like that. They just simply won't. But there might be more teams that do. And there's probably a critical mass where if all of EMEA and Americas were playing at Fnatic's pace, you probably wouldn't be nearly as interested in watching, because it's a lot of time just waiting around, right? You are watching people maybe walk around, wait around quite a lot. And it's just not that interesting to watch, if I'm being honest, right? So I do think that that might end up being a bit of a problem, where if we do see everyone go a bit slower, the esport might just be a bit worse to watch. So that is one of the reasons that I don't really like the direction. But another one is that I think that the timing is terrible of this patch and doesn't really make sense with what was going on in the game. Normally when Riot makes changes, they make changes that are influenced by what's happening actually in the game. But this patch feels like it doesn't do that at all. And the big clue to that is the fact that they've nerfed all of the initiators, when if you take a look at the initiator non-mirror win rates, you'll see that they aren't that great. So why are we nerfing every initiator, right? Why are we nerfing Breach and Gecko pretty heavily when their win rates are appalling this year, when the average for all of the initiators is below 50%, and telling you that initiators on average maybe aren't doing too well, right? And the 3 initiators that are doing well, I'm pretty sure you all could have guessed which initiators did well this year, right? And they giga nerfed one of them already. That's that. But if we come back to 2024 and 2023, if you can't see the 2023 average here, it's 48.1%. These are the numbers for all of the agents, right? And yeah, when I say Breach isn't good in pro play, I do mean Breach isn't very good in pro play. But actually, the numbers have come down, right? We've actually gone down this year for the initiators versus, say, the past year, right? Which then brings up the point, why then are we nerfing all the initiators if they're in arguably a worse spot than they have been for a very long time? But maybe you don't like those stats. Maybe you say, well, they're tending towards 50% anyway. Do they really tell me enough, right? Which is absolutely fine. But this year, I actually have the data for the archetypes as well, right? So this is the double initiator archetype win rates. So a double initiator archetype is when a team plays, you know, a controller, 2 initiators, a duelist, and a sentinel, right? Very, very standard stuff. And it doesn't matter what agents it actually is, just as long as the, you know, overall form of the comp follows that kind of way, it doesn't matter who the actual agents are. But when this kind of comp plays against a double sentinel comp instead, so replacing an initiator with a sentinel, or a double controller, or a double duelist comp instead, well, do you want to see how they did this year, playing double initiator versus the other main 3 ways that you might play this game? Yeah, it wasn't good. Yeah, it really wasn't good. Like, this is across all maps in Tier 1 VCT this year. Playing double initiator was terrible. Why are we nerfing all of the initiators? And if we take a look at the rank stats as well, it largely tells a similar story, right? Like here on tracker.gg, and again, if these numbers are wrong, blame them. But in terms of the most picked agent, you've got Sova here as an initiator at 5.4, of which there are multiple agents from the other classes above him, right, before we get our first initiator. Then Fade and Gecko at 3.5 and 3.3, and then you have to drop down quite a way to get to Sky and Breach, right? So it's not like initiators are the most popular picked in ranked. If you look at the win rates, Sova and Fade are doing fine, as you might expect, because they're good agents. But after that, no one else is above 50%. Basically, my point is, apart from Sova and Fade, who we all know and accept are good and have decent pick rates and win rates, why are we nerfing the other initiators, though? Right? Does it actually make sense for what is happening in the game if they don't have a good ranked win rate and they don't have a good pro play win rate? I would argue no. The next point I'd like to make about this patch, and I kind of went into this a little bit yesterday, but I do think that this patch, if they wanted to go in this direction, doesn't really make any sense for some of the things that they didn't do, right? I mentioned this with Viper yesterday, but to me it just makes no sense why we changed Neon's, you know, recharge ability. Okay, I get that. That makes sense in line with the initiators and, you know, less utility, less recharge all the time, like being more careful with how you use your util. But then with Viper, we didn't. You know, this to me just feels like, did you just forget? Are you Daenerys in season 8 of Game of Thrones? Like, what is going on? Like, did we just forget this? And then there's the guns as well, right? They did make some gun changes to the Bulldog, Phantom, Vandal, and Stinger and Spectre. But there are other guns that, you know, with less utility in the game, like the Op, the Judge, the Outlaw, very strong guns in this game that essentially just get way better if they can't be pushed off. I mean, you could easily abuse the judge pretty hard right now, and I don't think that would be a problem. Also, Vito wasn't in these patch notes. Why? Like, is his util still 40 seconds? Does that really make sense? Like, I know he just came out, so like nerfing him straight away would be a little bit strange, but you really went to town on some of these other sentinels, right? Like, and I don't think many people's reaction to Vito was, oh, this agent's awful. I think most people thought, no, this agent looks pretty good. So why did all of their cooldowns change and his didn't? I don't understand. And then that leads to my final point, which is generally when Riot makes changes to the game, they tend to nerf the stuff that is meta. But in this patch, I would argue that the meta got stronger. The meta got more reinforced. Because if you take a look at the champs pick rates here overall, right, and where we were with Omen, I still think Omen will get played a lot, right? Had they nerfed Omen and not Astra, I'd been like, okay, yeah, that's cool. They nerfed Astra as well, though, so less cool, right? Sova and Fade were the only two initiators that were good anyway, and I don't think people are really going to change their mind. I think you've just reinforced much more that you're probably going to play solo initiator, and it's probably going to be Sova or Fade. I think you've just reinforced that even more. Yoru, as someone rightly pointed out to me yesterday, the Yoru nerf, if you watched my video yesterday, you'll know I didn't think it was that big of a nerf in general, and you still definitely should play Yoru. But if anything, it was more of a ranked nerf for Yoru, where Yoru wasn't a problem, rather than a pro play nerf for Yoru, where Yoru is very strong. Viper's pick rate will probably go up. Probably pretty significantly, I would have thought, because for some reason, again, they forgot Viper. And then, okay, the Sentinel class is maybe the one thing that will change, right? Maybe that is the one class where, you know, you've got the introduction of Vito. Vice and Cypher got, you know, pretty heavy nerfs, so maybe Killjoy will come in a bit more as well. So maybe the Sentinel class will change, but I hope you like Solo Initiator double smokes / double duelist, because that's all the meta is going to be. I mean, that's what it was before, and now it's just going to be that even more. So yeah, this is why this is a bit of a bizarre patch for me overall, is that I don't think it's a great direction to go in. I don't think the execution of that was the best either, and I think it's going to lead us down a path where the meta that we had before is just going to get solidified even more and lead to a very confused state where I personally believe before VCT in 2026, they're probably going to need to do another pretty big patch to kind of fix the problems that they didn't fix in this latest one.